Hello YouTube. I'm going to talk about a topic that is a little bit difficult to talk about today, mostly because it's something that as a teacher we are often asked in an interview, and it's a question that is very difficult to answer. This video is not necessarily for students, though I think students can benefit from it as well, though some of the English I use may be quite difficult, so I will warn you about that now. Over my voice, because I don't want my face to be distracting and I don't want the camera to be distracting for me, I'm going to be putting images of some of my favorite moments in teaching and some of the presents that I've received as a teacher. It's not to try and put myself in a light of being a perfect teacher or anything like that. It's just that I don't really have another option to put in the background over what I'm saying. So the two are not necessarily related, it's just to have something to look at if you are not just listening. So I'm going to answer the question, what does it mean to be a teacher? And of course this is going to be somewhat subjective, but at the same time it's a question that I've thought about many times. I spent a lot of time chewing on this question, trying to pick apart its essence, and it's a difficult question to answer, as I've said. I've heard many short, concise answers that, to me, seem to fall short and don't even begin to answer the question, if I'm honest. I guess the first thing to say is, as a teacher, our subject is a negligible point. It doesn't matter if I'm an English teacher, if I'm a PE teacher, if I'm a history teacher, our job is the same. People who are truly teachers are not simply doing a job. It is a way of life. It's almost a philosophical stance. It was very disheartening to me talking to a colleague about this point last year, where he had the utmost respect for Aristotle, Socrates, and other notable teachers of old, and we kind of got onto this topic, but for some reason the comparison of our job to theirs was met with both anger and ridicule, and I have to wonder, why is that? Why is it that teachers of historical note are considered geniuses and life changers, but we, modern teachers, are considered desk sitters, quoting from a teacher's book with no actual knowledge or wisdom of our own? We have the same job, even if we're not philosophical masterminds like the two examples that I gave. I'd like to point out that I'm not comparing my legacy to that of Aristotle, not at all, not by any stretch, just saying that we should view our role in a similar way, helping people find truth and, most importantly, their own truth. The fact that I teach English is arbitrary, and this almost sums up why I'm against testing in general. A teacher is a tool, like the dictionary or the pen in the student's hand. I personally think we're there as a springboard, as a start point. We're definitely not a preacher, and our opinions on anything should not come into a discussion unless it is requested. I make it my aim to get students to think for themselves, to work to their own goals, and for me to be there to help them in whatever way I possibly can. They learn about the subject too, of course, but that isn't always the priority. This new generation of young adults scares me a little bit, and the way the media works, where a person in perceived authority says something and people just accept it without thought or reason, it's a bit worrying. I never make it my goal to tell somebody something is somehow wrong. That is never my goal, but to simply encourage them to question everything and think for themselves. That even extends, of course, to questioning me. It's one of the favorite moments I have in a classroom when a student says, "I don't think you're right." I think that's great. That is the start of a debate. That is the start of cognitive discourse, and it's something that is sorely lacking in the world today. So anytime that happens, that is great, and I like to be able to allow that in any lesson with any kind of student. The thing I think we have to consider as teachers is that we are a perceived authority, and we therefore have to be responsible with that power. As a result of this, I'm often considered to be a controversial teacher because I hold this view, and also for what I'm about to say. I'm not afraid of any subject with any student that happens to come up in class. It isn't that I'm not careful about how I approach things, but no topic is absolutely taboo. If a student brings up something that is important to them, I'm not going to shut them down and say something ridiculous like, "You can't talk about that, so don't think about it. Students are growing up in a world where more information than ever before is easily accessible, and the information is not always good. They can do this all day, anytime they want. And no matter how much people want it to be, this information cannot be totally censored. It's always going to be there. So to have an adult conversation with somebody who is considered a mature human being and is put into a position where we are supposed to be having these conversations, then I think that's much better than them finding out, for example, from the internet, even if they happen to be very young. And it can be problematic, of course, because people have a wide range of views. But if these things come up, it's not a good idea to squash them, no matter what the thing happens to be. I'm being very tactful in not giving a specific example here. And I'm doing that on purpose because the problem is that there is this divide between subjects that are acceptable and subjects that are not in a classroom. But at the end of the day, if the student has a problem and real conversation can be had about something in the real world, then that should be happening in the classroom. That's not to say that the teacher's going to be the authority on the subject, not by any means. In fact, it may even be something I don't know very much about. That doesn't mean, however, that the conversation can't happen. If it is getting to the point where somebody is getting upset, or if it is getting to the point where there is madness in the class, then maybe it's worth getting back on topic. But if we're having a general adult conversation, or at least a mature conversation, adult is a word I don't like to use, then I invite that in my classroom. The thing I always keep in mind when conducting a class or talking about any subject is that every human being lives in their own knowledge bubble. Mine is bigger than yours when discussing certain subjects. Yours is bigger than mine for other subjects, and I'm willing to accept that. Even as a teacher talking to a young child, there's still a chance they know something more than I do about certain subjects, and I'm willing to learn from them, as well as I hope they are willing to learn from me. Even all of human intelligence is a bubble compared to everything that can be known, of course. A teacher's role is to allow students to expand their personal bubble, and to be constantly willing to expand our own in the process. And if we're not doing this, then we're doing something wrong, in my opinion. I don't believe in any specific philosophy in regards to teaching. Most things we're taught about teaching are limited, and almost all these things assume that one shoe fits all. If you do this for students, everything will be fantastic. It's not how it works. Every student is an individual. Everyone learns in a different way and has different goals, motivations, and needs. A teacher's number one priority is learning what these things are about your students, then doing whatever you can to help accommodate them. I strive to spend a lot of time working with individuals as fairly as I can, because lecturing doesn't work in my eyes. As a result of this, discipline has a very different meaning to me than to certain other teachers that I know. I'm incredibly strict when it comes to safety. Dangerous acts are quickly challenged. I don't want to see students get hurt, of course. I don't want to see a student run into a road, for example. That thing, I will raise my voice and I will call out the student immediately. But noise in a classroom, multitasking, such as drawing and listening, for example, untidiness, things like this, get a degree of leniency. A pretty big degree of leniency, if I'm honest. In the correct environment, these things are even sometimes encouraged. For example, in a language classroom where I tend to teach, noise is fantastic. It's better, of course, if the noise is in English in my own personal classroom, but nevertheless, if there is some kind of discussion going on, and I can kind of follow what is happening, I'm not necessarily going to stop it immediately, but I will try and pull it into the classroom and into English, if I can. Above all else, though, my final thoughts on this point, I guess. It's important that we, as teachers, are just human beings. We make mistakes, and we certainly can be wrong. A big factor in mutual respect is showing that that is the case to your students. If you're an authoritarian, you're going to create a divide between student and teacher. Same if you present yourself as all-knowing. I am in no way better than the student sitting in front of me, whether they be a preschooler that is 3 or 4 years old, or an adult that is much older than me. I have no obvious advantage over them. They are a person, they have a goal, and it is my job to help them achieve that. This is what being a teacher means to me. What does it mean to you? Teacher or student, please let me know in the comments below. Bye bye for now.